episode is simply retirement. Tommy's going to join me in a second, but I have written some notes, some things that I just wanted to convey. So it was 30 years ago this month that my family moved to Roanoke, Virginia, on Lost Mountain Road. And my dad immediately put up a hoop for me and my older sisters to play on. It was on that court that my basketball dreams began to take shape. It was an uneven patch of dirt, gravel, and grass. And as a 7-year-old boy, I dreamed of playing at Duke. As I got older, I dreamed of playing in the NBA. The last 30 years of basketball have been beyond my wildest dreams. I never could have imagined that I would have played basketball for this long. After years of youth leagues, AAU, high school basketball, 4 years at Duke, and 15 years in the NBA, I'm retiring from the game that I love so much. Going into last season, I wanted it to be my last year, but wasn't sure how the season would play out. It was difficult for a number of reasons: being injured, being away from my family, COVID protocols, and really, truly not playing up to my standards. I would like to describe last season as a 7-month exercise in coming face to face with my own athletic mortality, and it was scary and confusing. I wanted to give myself some time to reflect and figure out if I wanted to keep playing. It's one of the reasons that I told teams that called during free agency that I would decide later on. I didn't want to commit to anything until I was sure. Well, I have some clarity now, and I know it's time. It's time for me to be a dad. It's time for me to reflect, pause, and it's time for me to get ready for the next phase of my life. There's some things I'll miss. I will miss the competition. I will miss the routine. I will miss the thrill of playing in front of 20,000 screaming fans. And I'll miss the camaraderie that comes from playing a team sport. So many people have helped me along the way that there's literally too many people to name. I do want to take a few moments to name a few of them, though. I want to thank my first AAU coaches, Delmar Irving, Keith Haynes, and Dick Wall. You guys instilled a sense of toughness, competitiveness, and discipline in me. I want to thank Boo Williams, who gave me my first shot on the big stage, Billy Hicks and Chris Morris at Cave Spring for pushing me every day, keeping me level-headed. Of course, Coach K, Chris Collins, Steve Wojciechowski, Johnny Dawkins, and all the amazing people at Duke for helping me grow and letting me live out my childhood dream. To all of my coaches in the NBA, thank you. You helped me become a better player, a better person. There's so many people behind the scenes that have had a huge role in my career. I want to say thank you to all my trainers, the massage therapists, the chiropractors, the equipment staff who gave me new socks for every game, the support staff, the player development staff, the PR staff. Like I said, there's just too many people to name. There's also been dozens of people who have met me in random gyms all over the country to rebound and pass for me. It didn't matter if I was on vacation or in full-on grind mode in the off-season. So many people would meet me at any hour to help me get my work in. A few people I want to mention: Joey, Jordan, Jay, Ross, Tim, John, Jamel, Joe Boylan, Chris Carwell, Brock, to name a few. Thank you. My routine was sacred, and you helped maintain the integrity of that routine. I also want to thank my agents from Wasserman, Greg Lawrence, Bob Myers, Arn Tellem, for helping me navigate the first 10 or 11 years of my career, and Steve Human, Jessica Holt-Steinberg, and Aaron Mintz for helping me navigate the last 4 innings of my career. When people ask me what will I sort of miss most and what I appreciate most about my career, I can honestly say it will be the relationships that I've built and the moments I've had with my teammates, the moments I've had competing against my peers. It's been a true honor to be in the NBA Brotherhood for the last 15 years. My mom and my dad have had such an incredible influence on my life and my basketball career. They, with 5 kids, all playing sports, they drove all over the country. They tried to make it to as many games as possible for all of us. They've been a steadying influence on my life, and they still are today. My brother, David, my sisters, Alyssa, Katie, and Abby, thank you so much for your support, your encouragement, and your inspiration. Lastly, I just want to say, I started dating my wife, Chelsea, in September of 2008, 13 years ago. It was an interesting point in my professional career. I was fighting for my place in the NBA. I was unsure if I even had a future playing at the highest level of basketball. But over the last 13 years, she's been my best friend, my biggest supporter, and the best teammate and partner I could ask for. She's been my rock, and I'm looking forward to helping more with school drop-offs, meal planning, and the boys' bedtime routine. And to my boys, Knox and Kai, can't wait to be your dad full-time. I don't think it's a coincidence that the best years of my career have been as a dad. You guys are everything to me. All right, that's about it. It's a little bit of a bittersweet day, but thank you, and thank you as always for listening to the pod. Let's bring on Tommy.
6 to 8 months has played into this decision.
Oh, it's a huge factor for sure. I mean, at my age, 37, this surgery that I eventually will get, it's a major surgery, and there's no real guarantee that I could perform. It's an Achilles injury.
Surgery.
Cleaning up my Achilles, some tearing in my Achilles, and shaving my heel bone, drilling a hole into the heel, and then reattaching the Achilles. It's a real surgery, and I'll get it eventually.
You better get it eventually because you're going to be in pain until you do.
Facts. But I think as much as it was the injury, COVID for sure accelerated this. A lot of it is time. I think time is really what it comes down to, and how I value my time right now. And that's not to say I don't love basketball any less than I did 3 years ago. But I've realized my number one priority for most of my life was basketball. That's not the case anymore. My number one priority in my life right now is my wife and my kids, and really spending time with them. And so it was sort of this weird sort of exercise of, how do I want to spend my time over the next year? And I came to the conclusion I want to spend that time with my kids. I've lost a lot of time with them already.
A lot more than most people.
Yeah. But I do think it's that decision is very much a luxury to have. I'm not sort of taking anything for granted there. I also, Tommy, and I kind of alluded to this when I was speaking earlier, but when you sort of face your own basketball mortality, it's a scary thing. And to make the assumption that I can have this surgery and come back a few months before turning 38 and be the same player, I just think that's unrealistic.
We've talked about it with a bunch of guys who are a couple years ahead of you, but have been in similar spots. I'm thinking about like D Wade, for example, about everybody comes to this in their own way, but you still have to face it, because the reality is no one's playing in the NBA when they're 45 years old. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's when that comes to you and how it comes. And some people are probably quicker than others at realizing it and understanding it. But it feels, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like just a deeply personal internal process in terms of coming to grips with everything.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, I knew back in November that there was a very good possibility that 2020, 2021 would be my last season. And it took me, close to 11 months to come to that conclusion that I was ready to retire. And I think it's important to note for, the hundreds of NBA players, the thousands of professional athletes currently playing, the tens of thousands of professional athletes that have retired. So much of our identity is wrapped up in being an athlete. And so as much as it is, it's hard to let go of something you love. It's hard to let go of something that's such a big part of your identity. I don't even know what it's like on the other side of being a retired NBA player, an ex-professional athlete.
Yeah.
It's scary.
For sure. And I think that's, I mean, not to blow smoke up your ass too much, but one of the things that you've done very well over the last couple of years, whether it's this or some of the other ventures that you've been in, is you've never been that guy that walks in flexing with, so I play for so-and-so, I do this, I do that. It's like you've always been sort of interested in carving your own way, even when you've been playing. And I'm going to ask you sort of next, like what, besides the family stuff and besides, getting yourself kind of like mentally mentally situated in this, new era, what you're excited about. But you've always been somebody that is like, I want to challenge myself to do this. I remember there was a point, I don't think it's happening anymore, but there was a point where you kept being like, I'm going to business school, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and da-da-da. And it's like, it's not necessarily that you like had this dream to go to business school. It was like, I want to see whether I can do it. And that, I think, is unique, not just among basketball players, but among a lot of professional athletes, and really just, I think, professional people in the spotlight who are used to becoming well-known and rich and successful in one specific thing. It's very, very hard to all of a sudden give that up.
Yeah, so a few things. Number one, I am signed up to take the GMAT later this year. I should mention that. Number two,
we'll check back in on that.
Yeah, we'll
and
check
see how
back
that
in on
goes.
that. We're not. I like optionality. I like optionality. Number two,
you've been signed up before. If
the podcast will continue. I mean, we are going to continue doing the podcast.
We're going to grow the podcast. We're going to grow the podcast now.
The only difference in the podcast will be that it's a podcast hosted by a retired NBA player, not an active NBA player, and Tommy. And then and then third, I would say this, just in terms of this next part of my life and this next phase for my family and I, is like, I've always tried to be super thoughtful and deliberate about decisions, and it will be no different in terms of whatever that next thing that I really go into full throttle. I want to take some time, have some conversations, talk to people about different opportunities, but really be thoughtful and deliberate about what that next part of my life is. Because as you know, and as many people that listen to the show know, I've got a lot of interests, man. Like, I think it's unrealistic to think that I could become a PGA professional golfer in the next 5 to 7 years. But
I also think that's unrealistic, just for the record.
I'm saying it's unrealistic. You don't have to hammer home the point, but
deeply unrealistic.
Deeply unrealistic. I actually took a lesson this morning, and I like the guy who's been teaching me, like, sometimes I feel bad for him because I'm just like, man, this guy's got to be so frustrated with my golf swing right now. It comes.
This guy's
and goes.
just cash the check. I don't care.
Still hasn't billed me. I don't know why.
Not frustrated. I'm just teaching this guy a lesson. I'm just going to keep it moving, and that's it.
But no, I would say, like, I'm unsure of like what my next career is.
Yeah.
I'm going to take some time to just reflect and enjoy the last 15 years in the NBA, and when I'm ready for that next full throttle thing, I'll dive in.
And by the way, the way that the world is changing now, it's not necessarily, I mean, your personality is sort of hardwired to go all in on things when you do them. I mean, even us with this pod and the pod network overall, part of why it works and why it's successful, and there are a lot of different, no shade to anybody else, there's a lot of different people that have tried to do this over the years, and some of them have done it with varying levels of success. But part of why we've been able to develop whatever success we've had is that you're committed to it. And so you're doing them even, never on game days, but you're doing them throughout the season. You're checking in all the time. And that level of commitment, is why you'll be successful at any of these other things. But there is also I mean, we've talked about this before, but like, this is also a great time to chill. You know what I mean? It's like, It's like the goal now is not to be like, oh, I was doing this incredibly intense thing that I'm one of the 50, 60 best people in the world at doing. So now I got to go find another thing that's like that, because that's going to be fucking hard. Like, there's not, that doesn't happen overnight.
No, I hope I do find something that brings that. I don't know that you'll ever find something like playing a professional sport, especially a professional team sport. But I do hope I find something that I'm super passionate about, that gets my competitive juices flowing, and that, the thing is too, as an athlete, like, so much of our stimuli is physical.
Yeah.
And I always talk about this with NBA players, like, the best NBA players are also the smartest NBA players. And so much of this next part of my life is like, where can I find intellectual stimulus, as opposed to just the physical part. And that's exciting.
And what's exciting, I mean, the other exciting thing about that, and, I think 342 is an example of this, but there are other things you're involved in, there's other things that we're both involved in or whatever, from a business standpoint, that do have that stimulus that are not physical. But I think, we always talk about like the similarities that, whether it's athletes who play different sports or athletes and musicians or whatever have, but there's a lot of similarities between athletes and business people. We've talked about that with a few people in the leadership series in terms of, how they, both their competitiveness, how they look at the world, how they, can be single track minded on one mission, on one goal. And so I think figuring out different ways to plug that mental energy into spaces like that. And obviously we're going to do that with this here. But that's going to be fun. Like that will be a thing that will be a thing that is exciting because, you're in a weird way. It's like when you're not reliant on physical things you can't control, sometimes it can be more exciting in a way because there's always going to be things outside of your control, but your Achilles breaking down is not something you could do anything about. There really isn't. It's not like you can work your way out of it or talk your way out of it. That's a thing that just happens. And so everybody, from Kobe on down has dealt with this, at various stages of their careers. And so it does make that next, sort of move that much more exciting.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up one thing, and just to sort of reiterate and encapsulate this whole thing is like, there's not a one why. There's not a one why of why it's time for me to retire. There's a bunch of them, and you factor in all that stuff and you weigh them and you reflect and you question it and you change your mind 62 times between June 7th and today. But then you get to a moment, and that was for me 10 days ago, where it's crystal clear. And that's really the reason why. Again, I just want to thank everybody for always, for listening to the pod, for supporting the pod. And I do want to say, like, I know I'm not Stephen Curry. I know I'm not LeBron James, but I recognize like there is a group of people out there who have followed my career from Cave Spring, from Duke, who bought my Duke jersey, who bought my Magic jersey, who buy my trading cards. And like, I think it's the coolest thing in the world. As a kid, I used to send cards off to Jim Tomei and Sandy Alomar Jr.
Buy your one Top Shot.
Yeah, my one Top Shot is a layup.